Hi everyone, today we are going to be making a delicious pizza inside the Polito Giotto. I have my wood right in the middle, stacked up a little bit, and I've got my paper, just random paper that I've used that you can print with, scrunched up in different areas, and then I lit it up with a match. We're going to let that catch and then let it build nice and big before we go ahead and then start shifting it to one side of the oven. That way we get a nice arching fire that kind of rolls over the top of the oven and heats up the other side as well. Continue to feed the fire in this way, and in the meantime make the most of the energy that's being made. I like to use caramelized onions on my pizzas, and I'm also going to pre-cook the mushrooms and my little eggplant cubes as well. So I've got a steel iron here, a stainless steel pan. You could use cast iron here instead, but this worked pretty well. I've added oil, a little bit of salt, and then my sliced onions. I pop it into the middle of the oven. Every couple of minutes I'll give it a stir until I'm happy with the caramelization. If you wanted to, you could make this with a little bit of sugar as well and a splash of vinegar for that nice sweet and sour style onion. Once that's cooked, I'm adding in the mushrooms, a little bit of salt, no added oil. I'm just letting them wilt and lose most of their moisture. Once they're nice and caramelized as well and colored, we will put them off to the side and lastly add in our cubed eggplant. Everything is now cooked. I am going to shift the fire over to the other side, add a little bit more wood and allow that to reach about 400 or so degrees on the stone. Brush away the ashes. And then if you wanted to, you could use a kind of like a, not quite wet, a wringed out towel and give it a bit of a wipe down on the stone, kind of like a mopping to make sure that you don't get an ugly, bitter taste in your mouth on the pizza. I have a 85 to 90% hydration dough. It was pretty heavily hydrated, so it's super soft. And I'm just popping that onto a mountain of semolina, pressing out the air from the center into the edges. And I'm not going to pop this over my hands because I knew it was going to be a little bit too weak. It is a little over fermented, I have to say. And then onto a wooden board she goes with more semolina. I find that wood is the best medium to use here. My dough rarely sticks onto the wood. I have tomato sauce that I've added to the base, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and then starting with my caramelized onion. Next I've added on my beautiful caramelized mushrooms. Lastly, the eggplant cubes that tasted amazing. And then some mozzarella cheese. You could add a drizzle of olive oil, you don't have to. And then I'll pop it onto my paddle. Gonna make sure that the pizza reaches the very edges, so make it as big as I can. And then pop it onto the stone. Let it sit there for about half a minute or so, just until the very side starts to bubble and caramelize. Now I didn't want that to happen too quickly, so I did put my pizza peel in front of it just to block a bit of that heat. The edges are nicely puffing. I'm starting to get a bit of color on the right there, so I'm going to break the seal underneath the pizza, release it from the stone and give it a 180 turn. I like to pop it back in the same spot, that way it's less likely to burn on the base. My oven though was running a little too hot for my liking. It's beautifully cooked underneath. At this point what I could have done is continue to cook it on the pizza peel, so just lift it off of the stone a little bit, that way it wouldn't overcook on the base. But it was still a very delicious pizza. Gonna chop that up, enjoy my dinner, and then I'm gonna let that fire slowly come to an ember. After which I'll take my pizza peel and I will just spread those embers all over the floor from left to right, just covering as much as I can. I was impatient. At this point you would probably put on the door and allow that to just die off completely. That way as much of the heat is evenly distributed as possible. However, I let it get to about this stage, and then I tossed out the embers, removing them from my pizza oven and into a fire pit. You could use that fire pit to cook maybe some roast capsicum or chestnuts. And I did brush those ashes all around the exterior of the oven, so the edges of the oven. And that way it just maintains a nice even temperature for a little bit longer. I'm going to take whatever pizza dough I have left, fold two sides in and then fold that in half, seal it at the base. And then I did have this big one here that I wanted to make focaccia with. Releasing it from the sides with some semolina, dumping it upside down, and then so that my fingers don't stick, I'm going to apply some semolina over the top, indent with my fingers, and just moving that air around the focaccia. I have a baking sheet lined with baking paper. I'm going to gently spread that out and then drizzle on generously with some extra virgin olive oil. Then you can spread on some dried herbs. I've got oregano and rosemary, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. And with the bread, after about 20 minutes, I'm going to score the top of it on a 45-degree angle, spray some water into that score line, and then we shall add in the focaccia on one side and the bread over the other side. At this point, my oven was at about 300 degrees Celsius. Because we removed a lot of those embers, it's going to cool down faster than usual. After about 20 minutes, my bread looked like this, and my focaccia looked a little like this. You could turn it around, let it toast a little extra, but this was a pretty decent bake. Cut it into strips if you like. I'm going to be using this like a bread roll, so I'm going to tear this little beauty open. My impatience. It was so hot, but I really wanted to eat it while it was hot and crunchy on the outside. Topping mine up with a bit of a bruschetta, so I've got my tomato, onion, and I'm adding in some avocado as well, bit of salt, pepper, and oregano. You are good to go. This is one of the most delicious snacks, one of my favorites. So that's it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this was a fun little demo. Feel free to subscribe if you like these sort of videos, and I shall catch you guys again next time.